Welcome to This Week in Vegan Instagram. I'm your host, Carnivore's Vegan. Please like and subscribe and share if you like anti-vegan channels so you can support those of us who are doing this kind of work. And this week we're going to start out with Leonardo Venus. This is a very strange video, and I'll let you watch it and let you decide, and then we'll discuss it. But be sure to turn up your volume on your computer. I must have recorded it really low, so here goes. Turn up your volume for the duration of this clip.
By the way, a lot of people are asking because you're on my stories like every single day if we're boyfriends.
Yes, we are.
Oh, you got secrets out.
Yes, we're married. And
Where's your ring? Where's your ring?
It's here, you can see it.
Okay, turn your volume back up. Back down, sorry, if this is too loud. So I just thought that was weird how flippant he sounded. Like, was he really serious? Or was he just, I don't know, just messing around? He might have just been messing around. It kind of sounded like it, but I don't know. I don't want to take it for granted that he was messing around. Or, you know, if he's gay, that's cool. And I think it was Juliet, or Hot for Health, I can't remember, who mentioned, oh, I think he might be gay. So you called it if he's not messing around. That's not really something you mess around about saying, like, oh, we're boyfriends, when you're not. But it sure sounded like the married was bullshit and he was just bullshitting. I don't know. Maybe we'll learn more later on. But as it is, it sounds like he's gay and he's in a relationship with this guy Skadal. I don't know who he is or what's going on, but that's the story, apparently. So, moving on to plant-based news. Plant-based news says, it blows our mind that we grow enough food to feed 70 billion animals a year, only to turn those animals into food to feed 7 billion, while 1 billion people on Earth go to sleep hungry. Eating meat is not sustainable. So, vegans do things like this where they imply that the meat eating has something to do with the 1 billion people on Earth going to sleep hungry, when it doesn't have anything to do with it. So what does this one have to do with another? They're implying that we're feeding the grains to 70 billion animals, and those grains could be used to feed 1 billion people, but most of these animals that they're feeding are super small. They're like, chickens are the most commonly consumed food, and they're 5 pounds and get to slaughter weight in something ridiculously small, like 6 weeks. So the 70 billion animals have nothing to do with 7 billion people. So I have no idea what they're talking about. And anyway, there's a study that says, you know, we can already feed 10 billion people, and that the amount of food we have is plenty to feed everybody, but it has nothing to do with scarcity, that it has to do with poverty and inequality. The rate of global food production has increased faster than the rate of global population growth, and we produce 1.5 times enough food to feed everybody on the planet. So the plant-based news is just making this emotional connection that doesn't actually exist. It doesn't make any sense. And then if you talk to vegans, they will tell you all the time, oh, we're going to start doing vertical farming, vertical farming, vertical farming. So if we're going to do vertical farming, then why are they worried about shortages? You know, we don't need any particular amount of land. We can just build up, and we can build more food systems. And also in China, they're building like hog farms on skyscrapers. They're doing indoor hog farming that are vertical. So I don't know what these guys are talking about. It's just trying to scare people. And then what's funny about the vertical farming is that as soon as this vertical farming came into being, there's companies that are now doing it for animal feed. And this is actually kind of cool because and a really good use of this technology because they don't have to grow the whole plant. They can just grow the sprouts and then feed it to animals. And basically you're getting, grass-fed animals, even though they're indoors, because this is, the grass is what they should be eating, the sprouts, basically. So if you feed them like wheat sprouts, wheat grass, you're feeding them the grass, and that's actually really good for them. So this would be great for dairy farms and stuff, and that's what they're using it in, as dairy farms and feedlots, cattle feedlots mainly. So chickens really thrive on these sprouts for supplement. They can't have all of that. They still need grains, but this is a great supplement for chickens. So I'm looking forward to seeing what this technology brings, that it'll improve animal agriculture as well as plant agriculture, I think, and there's no shortages. That's just bullshit. Moving on, I can't remember who this guy is. I didn't write it down what his name was, but this is kind of a typical appearance of vegans, where they have kind of swollen faces. The other guy I'm thinking of with the swollen face, the reason I took this was because of his swollen face reminded me of Vegan Gains, how his face always looks swollen, and we were talking with somebody on YouTube about his face potentially being the result of potentially having colitis. I don't recall him ever saying something about colitis, but maybe he is taking prednisone, a steroidal anti-inflammatory medication for that, because they were saying that he had a moon face. And I hadn't read anything about that or heard any of him ever saying about that he had colitis maybe, or some sort of gastrointestinal disease that needed him to take prednisone, like Crohn's or something like that. But if anybody has any information about that, drop it in a comment. I'd love to hear about it. But the other reason I took this, once I took it for his face, the swollen face, he's obviously very, very thin. You can kind of see it in his neck and his shoulders that he's thin. And he's just got this really swollen, puffy face that is indicative of, I think I've gone over that in one of my other videos, of Dr. Sean O'Mara does visceral fat testing. And he says you can just absolutely see it in someone's face. He can actually predict what someone's visceral fat content is by looking at their face. So, and he sees vegans a lot that have really high visceral fat content, even though they're like, oh, I'm in the greatest shape, doc. You won't find any visceral fat on me. And when he does their visceral fat testing, they're like full of visceral fat. The other reason I took this is his eyes. If you see how there's on three sides there's whites, that's abnormal, and that's not a clinical condition of anything in Western medicine, but it's called Sanpaku eyes in Chinese medicine, Sanpaku. And there's an interesting little thing. Many practitioners of alternative medicine believe a person who demonstrates yin Sanpaku eyes, and yin is more associated with female than male, which is another interesting thing of that vegan men often get this when it's a yin, it's a female thing, it's a too much female energy, basically, and it indicates that the mind, body, and spirit is out of balance. And this is supported by the fact that many people who are gravely ill are suffering from substance abuse, depression, or other mental illness have the whites of their eyes showing below the irises to varying degrees. I don't know how much there is it says there's some medical evidence to support this, but the one medical evidence to support it is that there's something called exophthalmos and also thyroid eye disease, and this is often in the case of people with Graves' disease, which is a hyperthyroid autoimmune condition. So I'm wondering how many of these vegans have a lot of thyroid issues, that they're having these Sanpaku eyes as a indication. So last week I talked about James Newbury and CrossFit with the plant-based doctor. He was saying something about James Newbury being the fittest man, and he's a vegan. Well, it's like he got all his fittest men awards as a non-vegan, then he went vegan. And Luciana Marchi said Newbury is not the fittest in Australia anymore. He had 2 injuries at CrossFitorian last week, And Sarah Sigmund's daughter also went vegan, and she's injured all the time. So I looked into this, and James Newberry had talked about, this is December 2019, he had just gone vegan, and this was maybe 2 months after he went vegan. He said, I went fully vegan 2 months ago, and I'm announcing it now. So he went vegan approximately, we're going to say January 2020. It was actually around, October or November of 2019. But just to make it easy, we're saying, 2020, January 2020. And then, so this is 2021, a year and a half later, he missed the whole season of 2020 because of COVID. And he came in 4th in Torian. And that may sound good, but that was exclusively Australia. Not a lot of people came from around the world because of COVID. And also, this disqualifies him for competing in the World CrossFit Games. So he is no longer Australia's fittest man. Royce Dunn would be. And he lost his spot at the CrossFit Games, World Games. And I believe, don't quote me on this, maybe somebody else who knows more about CrossFit than I, that there may be a makeup game where the 4th and, an invite, like the number 4 on several different countries gets invited to another CrossFit Games that can actually qualify them for the World CrossFit Games. I'm not sure about that, but I think I ran across that somewhere. So that will be interesting to see this development, but he's definitely not Australia's fittest man anymore a year after he went vegan, just about a year and a half after he went vegan. And then moving on to Sarah Sigmund's daughter, she changed to a vegan diet in 2019. She's also a CrossFitter from Iceland. And so that was 2019, and then 2021. This was interesting that it says she had a run of injuries and bad luck, and she got a knee injury in CrossFit Torian that completely puts her out for the entire season. So she got she didn't just hurt her knee, but she got an ruptured ACL. So she's out for the season. Will probably have to have surgery. I'm not entirely up to date on all the medical treatments for these kinds of issues, but the last that I was aware of was most athletes will get a full surgery for ACL tears. I believe that's the same thing that Cam Newton, and also I can't remember his name. There's a soccer player from Spain that he had a ruptured ACL too as a vegan. So this seems to be a common issue with vegans. I know it's a common issue in a lot of athletes, but there's only a few vegans in these high-level sports, and they're all getting ACL tears. This doesn't bode well. So, moving on to Raw Bliss, as you might know from Sean Baker's posts and other things, he was very, very emaciated at one time, and he's gained back some weight, but it doesn't look like healthy weight. Like you can see in his face, he looks like in his face, if you saw his face, you'd think he was like a 200-pound guy, but he's thin too. He's a raw fruitarian, and he's very thin, but from the look of his face, you'd guess he was like 200 pounds, 220 pounds. He looks fat, but that's not why I'm talking about him today. What I'm talking about him today is a while back. This is not new. I don't actually know when this was. Somebody sent me this. This was his legs, and they were super swollen. Look at how swollen those legs are. That is super abnormal. And we had talked about a week before or so, a couple weeks ago, that Daniela Raw and Wild also had super swollen feet, and these are these guys giving themselves protein deficiency. It's just crazy. They have to this is not normal for people in their 20s to have swollen legs, and these are both raw fruitarians. Not a good thing to have. Moving on, this was a super funny conversation that I had with this ideological vegan who is just cray-cray. This was on Twitter. So this guy, Hrothgarson, said, no, not really. Milk and milk products from other animals have been a staple for eons, and I'm fine with that because it's delicious, nutritious, quite literally, along with eggs, the perfect food. No, and she's saying milk is a modern thing, that we've only been eating dairy for a couple hundred years. 100, she's saying. Products like cheese only the last 300 odd years, not eons as suggested. The first cheese was only made in the mid-1700s. 1700s, which have been eaten for eons, not true. So first of all, she was assuming that eons really meant like thousands of years. And I looked it up just to see like what an exact time period of eon was, and it's often used for humorous or rhetorical effect, exaggerated. So he used that correctly of just a long time. We've been eating it for a very long time. We've actually been eating it for about, I think, 8,000 years is about as far back as they've traced it. So, but she gives evidence, and she says, haha, you think you know it all. We haven't been consuming dairy products for very long. And she says since the 1900s. And what it says is modern dairy farming, like automated things, have been around since the 1900s when we were able to do more automated equipment and use machinery for that. And she's trying to say this is when dairy farming, not just automated modern dairy farming, started, but she's saying, haha, I proved you wrong, and it's been around only since 1900. It's like, what? You are insane, girl. And then she goes on to talk about, this is just the stupidest conversation ever. So she says, we were talking about using tools for evolution, where the typical argument that we're supposed to use teeth and claws to get food. And she says, biological evolution has to do with our body shape and appendages, nothing to do with anything external, like tool usage that we gained the only throwing shoulder in the entire world with tool usage. She says, we're attracted to the food we're meant to eat by our senses. Very important to denote that. Decomposing flesh and blood is not pleasing to our biological senses. The smell is putrid. Some humans will even faint at the sight of blood. Well, what have vegans been doing for the last, several years, actually closer to 100 years if you count the SDA Church having done it, is fake meat. But wait, you keep arguing that meat is the only taste pleasure, and that's the only reason why you eat it. Now we're saying that there's no taste pleasure in meat, and you continually say that we eat it for taste pleasure, and you keep creating fake meats for no reason whatsoever? Then she answers, the true irony of that is that the plants you add to the meat make it taste good. Did you miss that part? You have to hide the real taste of it with marinade and seasonings. Without it, it just tastes like the dead carcass that it is. She's basically saying that we try to make broccoli taste like decomposing flesh because we just want the broccoli. and once you start being more carnivore and getting meat-based, you just don't need seasonings anymore. Meat is just great as it is. So her argument is that we eat meat for the seasonings, but we're turning broccoli into meat flavored because we just want the seasonings when we could just eat the seasonings on broccoli. But we don't. We want it as fake meat. So great logic there. And she says she has an IQ of like 120 or 130. I'd hate to see the vegans that have IQs of, 90, what they're doing, when that's an IQ of 120. So I'm probably, this next video clip is from Iowa Dairy Farmer on TikTok. He's also on Instagram, also Iowa Dairy Farmer. And I'm going to play this just once. You can listen to it again. Go to his TikTok and listen to it. But I probably do a post on this because it's a little bit complicated. He does the math for how many calories of food per acre can he produce on his land per acre than a vegan diet. And here we go. We'll listen to him. Listen really carefully because it's kind of complicated. But and he goes over it super fast. But I'll probably end up doing a post on this to get the math a little bit easier to comprehend.
Calories produced per acre, let's talk about it. We're going to do oat milk versus cow's milk, because oats can be grown well in Iowa. I'll be going off of this recipe. 4 cups, this is 1 quart. Look down the recipe a ways, they want 1 cup of oats. So for a gallon, we would need 4 cups. 1 cup of oats weighs 80 grams. In Iowa, a good yield for oats is 67 bushels per acre. 32 pounds in a bushel. It takes 180 acres to feed my dairy cows. Let's convert that to oats. 180 acres times 67 bushels to the acre is 12,060 bushels of oats. Times 32 pounds per bushel, 386,000 pounds. 386,000 pounds to grams is this number. 80 grams in 1 cup of oats. We need 4 cups of oats. 320 grams of oats per gallon of oat milk. We have this big number of total grams of oats for my 180 acres, divided by 320 grams, equals 547,145 gallons of oat milk. I ship 2,000 gallons of milk a day. 2,000 times 365, I ship 730,000 gallons of milk a year. Here's how many calories are in a cup of oat milk, and how many calories are in a cup of cow's milk. Please double check my math, but I think it's pretty clear who produces the most calories per acre. Calories produced per acre.
So I just thought that was cool. I need to get the math down a little bit more in my head before I can catch that, because it just went too fast. My brain doesn't work math that fast, so I'll be doing that a little bit more. Now on to the prime target that I talked about of the doctor calling his kid a trash can. So plant-based doctor was talking about a little bit, and I wish I'd have recorded it. It was on his stories. He was talking about how plant-based foods are less calorie dense than animal-based foods, and that growing kids, could have a problem with that. And he contrasted his 2 sons as being polar opposites of his 3-year-old son is more picky and it's hard to get him to eat, and that his younger son, who's about a year old, they call him Tommy Trash Can because he just eats constantly and eats them out of house and home. And I just thought that this was so sad, and just I think this is going to come back and bite him in the ass one of these days, because his son is starving. He's calling him Tommy Trash Can jokingly because he's feeding him a diet that has no nutrient-dense foods, and the poor kid is just having to eat and eat and eat and eat constantly to meet his nutritional needs. And how sad is that, to be a kid who's just constantly hungry, which is what the solution, what the problem is, obviously. But he's calling the poor kid Tommy Trash Can. That's just practically criminal. It's really sad. And if his 3-year-old son probably stopped breastfeeding not terribly long ago, so he's starting to feel the effects of not getting enough food, and he's looking real thin, so I'll be following them. That's it for today, and last but not least is a little video from the farm, and this was so cute. We have some little goslings that were starting to get out on their own a little bit, and I just introduced them to the chicken waterer. We have them in the chicken cage. We're hoping that they're going to be chicken protectors at some point, and we introduced them to our automatic waterer that's in the chicken pen, and this was just so adorable. Geese love water, and here goes. They're so excited. That's it for today. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button below and subscribe so you'll get notifications, and share this if you liked what you saw. Thank you all for joining me, and I will continue this series. I already have so much for next week. All right, thanks guys. Bye.